horror movies, mutilation, decapitation, torture. Does that sound entertaining? More blood than a blood bank. Have we got your attention?
Alright, welcome back to Video Waste Interviews Artist. I'm sitting here with Stephanie Thornton, Fredericksburg's own photographer, and we're here to talk about her photography, and so let's get it going. So, what made you want to start taking pictures? I've seen online that you have a lot of old pictures, so clearly this was before the digital age as well. So you've always had a fascination with taking pictures, I assume.
Yeah, I'm not really sure when it started. I think maybe like my sophomore year in high school. I always had disposable cameras and those cheap little Olympuses where you just like flip the front open, take your pictures, whatever. And I couldn't afford anything, so that's what I was using. And I always liked the style and the vibe off of that. And we had originally we had an amazing photo program at TC Williams, and once I started, the teacher we had was greedy, and she wanted all this equipment, and the school was like, we're not giving that to you, like that's unnecessary, like color processors and stuff. And so then she quit. So sophomore year, majority of junior year, we had substitute teachers. And they would just put on videos, and so me and maybe two other people, we just had to self-teach ourselves, and it was very challenging. We went through a lot of product, but yeah. Senior year, we ended up with Heather Hoffman, and she had worked for the National Geographic, and she ended up back in the DC area. She was perfect. She was a great mentor. And she definitely pushed me in the right direction. I was also an art student, sculpture, 2D design, drawing, paintings. I was really good at oil painting back then, actually, and I won several awards for this one painting of this guy that I did, and my mom still has it hanging in her office.
That's nice.
So I had applied to VCU, and I applied to Virginia Intermont. I wanted to be a little farther away from home, and also VCU didn't have a photo major at the time. They had photo classes, that was about it. So I weighed that out, and I also weighed out the fact of the student-teacher ratio. Virginia Intermont was a very, very small liberal arts school. It was smaller than when Mary Wash was a college. Smaller city block, too. And the biggest class I ever had was my British Lit, and that was 20-1. So I had plenty of photo classes where sometimes it'd only be 3 of us or 5 of us, and that was phenomenal. And I still keep in touch with all my professors, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have found my style and pretty much where I'm at today, because I had to study everything, digital, film, Photoshop, and how to scan your film properly, and the thing too with photo history. So much happened in such a short amount of time. That was the fucking worst. That was really hard I actually failed it the first year, because one person would do something, and then maybe a year later or 6 months later, someone else is like, oh, let's tweak it with a little bit more silver, things like that. And yeah, I still have all my notebooks because...
Do you refer back
crazy.
to them sometimes?
I did once I started developing film at home again. I went back to my notes, just because, you have to be particular with temperature and time and your chemical ratio. And, I had to learn the hard way during my curbside portrait project, because I was originally doing large format and digital. And there was one night where I got cocky and was like, oh, let me process a bunch at once. I screwed up, my film stuck together, and they still look cool, but they're not what they were supposed to be, where there's like streaks of chemicals, or you see an outline of another negative on top because they got stuck together. Because you need to make sure your concoction basically is hitting both sides of your film. And there's ways to do it where you can do, 5 or 6 sheets at a time, but I was trying to ball hard and did 10, and I was just rushing it. So I've taken a break from it. But with my other life changes going on right now, I'm hoping that will push me back into doing it again. Setting up at Market Square, doing $30 portraits and stuff like that.
That'd be cool. I don't know much about photography, but what is your style and what other types of style are there when it comes to like portraits especially?
Portraits is my main thing. Every once in a blue moon, it's very, very rare, I'll step out of my comfort zone and do abstract or not really landscape, but I like cityscapes, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I'm not the one that's going to go out hiking or go down to the river and shoot wildlife and shit like that. But I mostly do portraits, mostly women. But I have worked, with trans artists and models as well, men as well. But majority of the men that I have photographed are performers, whether they're clowns or do male burlesque, actors, stuff like that. So I try to focus more on, the weirdos, alternative people, performers, go-go dancers. And I've built amazing, friendships with these people, and I'm planning on doing a book of the portrait series, and some of the people that don't even live in Virginia happen to be in town.
Right.
They're from here and they don't live here anymore. So it was really cool to incorporate, Virginians. Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So you said DSLR. What is that, and like what is your rig? Like,
so SLRs are single lens reflex cameras, and you do have twin reflex cameras too, like what Adrian Elliott has, where he's looking down with his mirror with his focusing screen, and then there's two lenses. So basically you are looking through one to take your shot or to focus, and then the other lens is actually what's capturing the image. And I have been using Canon since 2003, and that was just honestly by accident, because I was in college, we needed a camera, and my grandpa was very supportive when I was in school, because I was the first family member to ever leave for a real college that wasn't community college. And I gave him a list of cameras. He ended up buying the Canon 20D for me, which isn't full frame, but it was one of the best ones on the market at the time. And man, that camera and I have been through some shit. And I ended up donating it when I became the store manager at Richmond Camera. And my mom actually helped me out and got me the Canon 60D, which I still have. Again, it's still crop sensor. It's okay in low light. Nikons tend to do a little bit better in low light situations when they're not full sensor. And a couple years ago, I got a settlement from my ex, and I finally went full frame. So honestly, the body alone was $3,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know they get expensive.
Yeah.
You mentioned Adrian. I went to Richmond Camera with Adrian when he went to buy a new camera, and I was just like, oh, really? How much technology can be in this little thing that makes it that much money?
Yeah, what makes it expensive is the processor. You got to think of, high-end computers and towers and stuff that you're building, especially for gaming when it comes to your graphics cards and stuff like that. Think of that, but it's in something as big as that.
Right.
And, they have cameras now the size of yours, and they're full frame.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane. Like, it blows my mind. It's like, man, I wish... that would be something cool for me to invest in later, because you're not clonking around this big ass camera where I've broken lenses because I've turned around and I smacked it on something. So
yeah, that's terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Like, I protect my little Canon very heavily. Like I keep it all like put away unless I'm using it.
Yeah.
You said you just finished this Porch Portraits?
Yes.
Yeah,
so...
What brought that about? Like, what made you want to do that?
So we were on full lockdown. I think I went to the grocery store 3 times. Jordan and I would swap out of who would go get groceries to try to limit exposure. And it sucks because my kid was cooped up in here. And so I spent a lot of time watching, trilogies and anthologies. And I was bored. And I was on Instagram a lot. You know, everyone's on social media, and I came across a photographer in, I think, Minneapolis or Minnesota, one of the two. I know Minnesota's a state, but I just can't remember. I know she's in the Midwest somewhere, but her Instagram handle is Curious Cumulus, and her project was a little different. So she was even scared to be 6 feet from people. So what she did is that she would photograph families through their windows.
That's great.
And it was really fucking cool because she would do it at sunrise or at dusk, where, you know, the sky's still a little blue, there's still a little bit of light going on, but then depending, you know, how their house is facing. So like right now, if she was doing it, yeah, you're going to see them in the window. But then sometimes she would tell them, get all your lamps and just put them in the room. I don't care what they look like, put all of them there. And some, you know, families turned out really cool, but I think only 2 or 3 that I saw back then were posed. All the other ones, she would just tell the families, hey, I'm coming by at this time. If you see me, it's me. Don't call the cops, kind of thing.
That's
and
cool.
It was cool because you would see families on their indoor bikes, exercising, cooking dinner, having dinner, praying, doing yoga, like dancing, you know, and it was cool.
Yeah.
And so there's another artist, Black Hand. She does tintypes, and she's actually been all over the news lately because she's been doing free portraits for African Americans at the George Floyd site. And she was doing tintypes that were curbside, and I already had the chemicals and stuff for it. Doing tintypes is way fucking harder than I ever thought it was going to be. I will try to revisit it at some point. I just didn't, again, like I said earlier, I just need to slow down and stop rushing everything, and then it'll work. And yeah, I saw that and I went, holy shit, I could do that here. And so originally I was only going to do the city of Fredericksburg, which the city of Fredericksburg really isn't that big. And a majority of our friends and our contacts and our associates are in Spotsy, Stafford. You know, you're out in King George, so, or, well, Colonial Beach. Montrose. So I knew that I could expand with it. You know, I had access to a Prius, so I was like, cool, gas won't be that bad. And, you know, there were people willing to pay. There were people that were broke, not getting unemployment, including me, which is another reason why I did the project. And, yeah, I just bought a 50-pack of film. I have a 4x5 view camera and was like, well, fuck it. Let's see where it goes. Overall, I actually shot more than 100 times, mainly because where I was rushing with the film, some people I had to go back and reshoot, or, you know, they hit me up last minute after I was done, and they're like, hey, I'll give you $100 if you include me in the project. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no. But overall, I raised about $1,000.
That's good.
Which was great. Majority of it went right back to photography, which was film, chemicals, like so many chemicals, and as long as it's unopened, it has a long shelf life. And I got a Epson V600 scanner, which honestly the best one on the market is the V800, but I wasn't trying to spend that much. and it sucked because during quarantine people kept thinking just essential businesses were open, and they weren't thinking about manufacturers. They weren't thinking about these, you know, companies like Canon and Epson. Their manufacturing plants were shut down. They weren't making shit. That's why the Switch sold out. Cameras sold out. Washing machines, dryers, fridges, like, because people were getting this fucking stimulus money, and they're like, oh, well, let's renovate the house. Oh, I can't get a new, you know, my neighbor took months to get an air conditioner. She would have to stay at her mom's, and I told them, I was like, you better tell them to knock it off your rent, because it was so hot in there, it killed her fish.
Boiled.
Yeah. So, you know, it was stuff like that where they're like, we're trying to find an AC unit, we can't find it. And so I really wanted a scanner because, you know, since I'm working on this project, you would have to process the film, print the photo, photograph the photo to have a digital copy. And I was like, I still have stacks and stacks of negatives, which is what you've been seeing me post. And I was like, I have to have a scanner. So
Yeah.
I found the V600 on eBay, and he knew he could get away with the price, because I think on Epson's website it was like 270, 280. He wanted an outrageous amount of money, and so I was like 300 shipping included.
That's not bad.
So
I mean, it's a larger machine. So.
oh yeah, it's pretty big. He packed the hell out of it. It's in great condition. And I mean, he mailed it out immediately. I got it within the week.
Then yeah, it's worth it than
Yeah.
trying to find something somewhere else. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes paying a little bit extra for that convenience and like the quickness is, why we have stores.
Yeah.
And we
And-
don't just shop online.
Yeah, and it's nice too because it's not just a film scanner. It has the accessories and stuff to do that. So I can, scan 35 millimeter, 120. But the only thing that it's not set up for is 4x5 sheet film. So the way I have to do it is, it has this tiny little strip for film that I have to scan half of it, scan the other half, and then Photoshop and stitch it back together.
Yeah. You have to try and line it back up.
Yeah.
Well, do you find that like the more you do it, the more you love it, or is like passion kind of running thin, or you have to find something to reignite the fire with?
Oh, it happens all the time. So, like I said, I haven't shot large format in a couple months. But digitally, I have done more shoots this year than I have, any other given year. Like last year, I think I only had 2 or 3 shoots the whole time. It was really discouraging. It really bummed me out. I know I'm expensive, but I'm reasonable.
Right.
And this year I just didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit if people paid me or not. I met some awesome people, probably, have developed lifelong friendships with some of these people that I met. And, everyone suffered, COVID depression because you're locked up, especially someone like me where I do have my big bouts of being an extrovert and want to socialize and be out. And, I've known you for 10 years now.
Yeah.
You know how I am. So
Yeah.
I was getting hard on myself and getting discouraged. And, so I struggle sometimes to find motivation, but, year's not over yet.
Yeah, definitely not. Not far from over. Well, is there anything that you wanted to talk about? I know you do the Flea Market. Is that going to be a continuous thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, this was the fourth year, not first year. And usually I do it, late spring, early summer, and it's been hot. We get sunburned. And the fact that the sun is up longer, I've had it scheduled for longer hours, like 9 to 7. I would get good feedback. I would get bad feedback. One of the worst ones was a couple that I had at Fat Boys, and she pretty much cussed me out and yelled at me. She decided to leave early, and she goes, it was really windy today, and this was unacceptable because I guess some of her stuff got broken because the tablecloth pulled it up. And I looked at her and I went, that's not my fault.
Yeah. That's
And-
nature and shit.
Yeah, I was
That's
like, how was
not
I supposed to know it was going
department.
to be windy and tell you to strap your shit down? Like, you should have had it strapped down.
Yeah.
And she goes, you shouldn't make it mandatory for us to have to be here all day. And I looked at her and I said, I don't.
Yeah.
I have people that work on weekends, and they're either showing up halfway through or they have to leave early. I was like, you just have to tell me. If you didn't want to be here this long,
Right.
you didn't have to.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucked because I knew that she and her husband could have had potential to be a part of it every year because
Right.
the product they make is great. And they do pottery and shit. They used to come see me at Foodie. That's how I met them, and was like, hey, you should be a vendor. And people would suggest, oh, do Halloween. I'm like, man, I can't do it twice a year. Y'all trying to kill me because
Yeah.
I don't make a profit off of this.
Yeah.
And so because of COVID, it was supposed to be Memorial Day weekend again. And it was going to be at Maury Park already because Riverfront's being renovated. Last year was amazing. It was a huge turnout. But this year, I knocked it out of the park. I had 50 vendors. We had, one entrance in you enter on Kenmore, you exit on William Street. So I had a lot of returning vendors. I had a lot of new people as well. And I liked it because I had an influx of, queer kids that are either in their early 20s or even teenagers that were vendors. And I always promote it as a safe space. And a lot of people made a lot of money. They made new friends. And, it made me feel good, as a mom, because I wish I had stuff like that growing up.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the other dumb shit that I did.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely going to do it Halloween weekend again next year. Because of COVID, it was supposed to have been Memorial Day weekend. And so Kim Herbert, love her to death. She was my regular at Foodie. She works for Parks and Rec. And she emailed me and was like, hey, so we're allowing groups of 250 people again. Check your calendar for September and October. And I go, okay. And she goes, oh, the only day that's booked is October 17th for like yoga in the park. I looked at the calendar and I go, holy shit, Halloween, full moon, on a Saturday, I'm sold.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, and it was cool too because her camp had a huge like trunk or treat thing with the farmer's market. So there were kids around. We had trick or treating. Most of my vendors had candy. I had costume contests. I did all kinds of stuff. I did raffles this year. I had $100 from Jack Brown's. I had $100 from Electric Paradise. Actually, I take that back. $200 from Jack Brown's. So I did one as a raffle and then one as best costume. And then Skin Touch Therapy gave me a huge basket, and that guy still hasn't picked it up. I keep texting him, but I think he travels for work. And the coolest part, though, that day, and especially growing up outside of D.C., I hear go-go music.
Yeah.
And I'm going, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out, and I thought it was a car. So I'm over at Freddy Donuts because the Ike's food truck was set up in the parking lot. And I had just missed it because as soon as I crossed the street to go back to the event, I found out that there was a 12-person go-go band on a flatbed truck driving around the area all day to get people to vote. And it was totally unbiased. And they're like, we're not telling you who to vote for. We're just telling you guys you need to get the fuck out there and vote.
Right.
And the following week was the first time I ever voted, and I'm 35 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was such a crazy year. But, I guess the next goal really is, since I'm done with the flea market, don't have to worry about that anymore until next year. I just want to finish working on my book, which I've only done a few pages so far, but I am definitely going to see this through. I have a couple different designs for covers and stuff, and the people that stood out the most, I will have excerpts or like a page written about them. So Ben Kirsch, his Instagram is Ben Jugglin', and he is phenomenal. He's the guy that I shot when we lived together with the big balloon on his head. Oh my God, this dude's so cool. He's been living in Houston for a few years now, and so when I photographed him that time was right before he moved. And the last 2 years, this year before COVID and then last summer, he was spending a couple months in Kenya.
Wow.
And he helps, I guess, young adults and kids that want to be performers out there, but it's so disgusting and poor. And I mean, the stories he told me, and he's like, Steph, these kids are running around barefoot on broken glass, like metal shards, feces, like it's just dirty. And they're out there doing these jumps and flips and not even getting injured. And he's just going, okay, well, let's go over here where it's more dirt. And he loves it. He wants to take over the program and, make it bigger and better. He wants, because of COVID, hopefully he can go back because he wants to do a permanent residence there and kind of do that year round. So there's him, and then, my friend Lydia, she actually won Best Costume at the Flea Market. She was hand sewing dresses all during quarantine, and so her curbside portrait, she looks like Mary Poppins, and she built that from scraps. And so that's just kind of the stuff that I want to talk about, like where she's come from, what she's been up to, what Ben has been up to. And there were some houses where I was there for 10 minutes and rolled out, or I was there for hours and either, you know, partying, you know, having a good time.
Yeah, I saw you at Courtney and Tyler's.
Yeah, that was fun. I had her do her first, what do you call it? She shotgunned a beer for the first time ever in her life. Tyler hadn't done one in about 10 years, and so that photo is one of my favorites because he's holding this giant hunting knife because that's what he stabbed it with. Yeah. He's drinking just fine, and Courtney's laughing because she didn't know how to do it, and it's pouring all down her. And then I took one after that and choked and like spit it everywhere. But yeah, it was just cool. And then friends that have had babies and, you know, friends that were pregnant in the shots. So we kind of want to revisit and get a shot now that the babies are born and stuff like that. And yeah, I am kind of tempted to revisit the project. I don't know if I would be able to pull off doing 100 again. Yeah. Where it kind of shows before and after. If I end up going to the same people. Yeah.
We also got to look at the people like me and my daughter were a part of it, but nothing's going to have changed in a year. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'll have more gray hair and she'll be a little bit taller. You know, there's not that much of a difference. But when you've got somebody who is pregnant and then they have an infant, that's a big difference. You know what I mean?
Or move houses, or they get married and stuff like that.
Can't recommend that. But so where can people find your photography?
Well, my website is stephphotogs.com, which a lot of people call me Steph Hot Dog because they can't read it properly, but it's a household name now. But yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I don't have a Facebook page because I never updated it anyway. So I just stick with Instagram and my website. Okay. Yeah. And my website too, I would use for the flea market. So that was a really cool, I guess, smart way for me to promote my photography at the same time, because when they're going, hitting events and looking at the flea market photos and shit, then they're going, wait, she's a photographer? Yeah. So then people would message me, and, you know, I got a couple side gigs through that as well.
That's awesome. Well, it's been good talking to you. It's good to see you again because we don't ever really see each other much anymore. I'm kind of a hermit, so thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
And, yeah. Any final words?
I don't know.
Love each other, guys. So here we are in Stephanie's dark room, which is lit up now for your entertainment. And she's just going to give us a quick rundown of what she uses and what they're for.
All right. Yeah, so I have two parts. I have more stuff in the dining room as well, or my kitchen. But before COVID, so I mentioned earlier that I used to work at Richmond Camera. So before COVID, this guy comes in, they sit at the bar at Foodie, and I go, Bill Setzer, is that you? And he goes, holy shit, how have you been? Blah, blah, blah. He was one of my regulars. He only shot, you know, medium and large format back in the day. We're getting caught up and talking, and he goes, well, do you still shoot? Yeah. Where are you living? I was like, I have a house, I have space, what's up? And he goes, well, my health is declining. A lot of it actually had to do with chemical exposure, doing this stuff for the Army his whole life. And he goes, well, do you want my stuff? And I was like, yeah, how much do you want for it? He goes, no, just I want someone to have it that'll appreciate it. Right. This shit that I got is, like, I can't even put a price tag on it. I ended up getting studio lights, stands. I mean, the chemicals I've bought, but a lot of this stuff are antiques. A lot of it hasn't even been used. Like, I have an antique Nikkor developing tank. Lots of cool stuff from Kodak, which is actually really hard to find. I'm in a couple large format groups on Facebook, and I see people looking for this stuff all the time. Yeah. And it's like, well, maybe I have a lot of it. Right. I also have a bunch of large format lenses for 8x10 cameras, which I don't think I'll ever go 8x10. But I have 2 antique enlargers. I have one in here, and then I have one that I sanded, cleaned, greased up, refinished the base, and I mean, it's in almost perfect condition. This one's actually in better condition than the other, but these take different condensers and different types of light, where you have like basically warm light and cool light. If I do, you know, because again, things are changing here at home, if I want to get back into it, what I'll do is clean this one up, and then I'll have 2 different enlargers for printing. And I have all my stuff here stashed in the corner to do tintypes. And tintypes is a tricky process because you are putting the emulsion down, you're making it light sensitive, but you still have to work somewhat fast because it'll dry up in the meantime. And I had this custom box made to process the tintypes. But Avery, when he measured it, he measured the 4x5 here, when really this part here where it's completely immersed, this needs to be 4x5 and then have the lid on top. But this is a prototype. You know, I told him, you know, whenever we get around to it, you know, I'll buy one from him. And plus we have to make sure that it's completely waterproof on the inside because, you know, it still leaked and came out. And it could be possible too that the chemicals that are involved with that, maybe it eats through what he used. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, so when doing tintypes, I have to basically modify a regular film holder. So I just need to get a Dremel from someone. You basically cut a window out. And since I didn't have that, my film slide would stick to the emulsion. So I ended up actually having to throw away a film holder because it completely fused together. And it was things like that where I eventually realized, oh, this is why my images aren't coming out, is because the film slide is scraping it off or sticking to it or drying too fast because I didn't have it modified the way that it should be. So then I also have my big setup of trays. I used to process in here. It wasn't working very well, so what I do is I'll cover my kitchen window, my oven light, because blue light, you know, film is the most sensitive to blue light. And so I cover that up, and I'll put a towel down, and I'll tell Izzy, you can't come in, knock before you enter, and I'll set up this big tray with all the little ones in it, because the film is only 4x5. So then I'll have my developer, my fixer, and my stop bath in the big one. That way if it spills, it's all right here. I was so bummed. So, if it wasn't for Bill, you know, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had this year with the project. And I also had an investor from Minnesota. He was my regular at Foodie as well. And I had been trying to get a large format camera for years, but they're usually in the thousands of dollars range, especially if they're antiques. They're stupid expensive. And I ended up finding a company in Brighton in the UK that they make reasonable cameras for $300. They have a lot of problems, but I'm not like banging it around.
$300 versus thousands.
So that camera is my baby. I named it Beth Black after my boss at Foodie, and I love that thing.
Let us know what else you got.
All right, so lastly, this is, I guess, really my real darkroom setup, where I process everything. This is the enlarger that I renovated, rewired it and stuff from Bill Setzer. I mean, this thing dates back to, I think, the late 60s, early 70s. The only thing I really had to fix was the cord on the bottom, but I love this thing. I feel like the only flaw with it is that it is hard to raise it and lower it, because most enlargers I used growing up would have a lever, or at least like a
crank of some sort. Yeah.
So this looks like this is a crank, but that's actually picking up the condenser and putting your film underneath it. But I have a huge collection of these giant condensers. I mean, this thing is probably 20, 30 pounds. And then I have different condensers depending on the size film that you're doing, whether it's 35, 120, 4x5. So I have it set up, I have it rigged in a way that I can shoot 4x5 or print 4x5 and 35 millimeter. But yeah, stacks of negatives. This is the box that I've been scanning for the past month or two, and I'm still not done. And it's been cool to revisit it because I'm seeing memories and stuff from high school and college. And then of course new stuff now that I'm adding to it. You get a better computer, it has a better graphics card, and my iMac was basically just going to shit. And so I really appreciate that he helped me be able to process better and faster. And that scanner, like I said, is amazing. It's worth the money for anyone that's watching that is kind of on the market for it. And it doesn't have to be just for film. You do have different attachments and stuff where you have your white background for documents, prints, and stuff like that. But then on the inside,
Well, it used to work.
you have that spot is what will scan your film. So I still have, you know, the accessory in here that holds it straight. Then you can flip it around and you can scan your 120 film. This is for other strips of film as well, or if you're trying to scan Polaroids and stuff like that, and instant film. Otherwise, you slide this piece on top and you can scan your normal stuff. It's pretty fast. Of course, if you're changing your quality,
Right.
that'll either, you know, speed it up or slow it down. But these right here are actually the negatives that I screwed up. And that's the only other, I guess, investment that I want to do is just a light table. But these were the stacks where I had said earlier where I put 10 in the tray and they stuck together. I don't even think I've scanned these yet, to be honest. Yeah, we got Allie and then the guy Ben that's been out in Kenya. But yeah. Yeah, and Matt Shelton. Yeah, I haven't scanned any of these. Well, I guess I'll have something to do later when I get home. But like I said at the beginning, you know, I want to get motivation, get back to it, and like I said, go to Market Square and
Do the portraits.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.